Thank you so much, my dear brother, and to everyone, assalamu alaikum, peace be with you all. It's a pleasure being on this panel. I congratulate the 𝗔𝗹𝘁 𝗔𝗹𝘁 and the Global Dialogue for Peace, this brilliant initiative for which I pray its success. And I think that the topic that we're touching on today is one that is extremely important from a number of perspectives. And I think that the issue that we're all trying to touch upon today is where have we gone wrong? What is it that has led humanity at the very pinnacle of its technological, cultural, intellectual advancements, led them to become so at loggerheads on so many levels? Why is it that when we look at the world today, a world that we inherited, and this, if we wish, civilization has been in place now for 200 years, probably even more, some would argue, from the French Revolution onward, from the time of Enlightenment. Why is it that we are facing the crisis at the levels that we are seeing today? And it is true that on many, many levels, we could talk about the crisis that we face and which are existential. We're not merely talking about an economic crisis or a social or a political or or a strategic or a security crisis. We're talking about crises that are on an existential level, that actually threaten the very place in which we all survive and exist, the world itself. Let's not forget, of course, our focus is about people and their welfare, but let's not forget that people, live in a very damaged environment, and the fight to save, the climate and save the world and try to reverse the kind of damage that we've inflicted upon our home, our collective home, is something that we as strategists and intellectuals and the such seldom touch upon. But it's going to be something that will mark the struggles and the conflicts and the fights of the coming 20, 30 years. But let's go back a little bit and try to touch on what we're addressing today. When we talk about a civilization, and we've all known, and many here have written very eloquently about civilizations and civilizational aspects and issues and the such, and what makes a civilization, and what breaks a civilization. And we've all studied how former civilizations have risen and prospered for a while and then fallen and crumbled and dissipated. The main characteristic that all civilizations are built upon is their ability, their inherent ability to promote and to advance a set of values. And those set of values not only marked intellectually or culturally, but actually practiced and promoted and perpetuated throughout the societies where this civilization stands. And I think that for a good while, the main values that we all agree upon, but from a practical point of view, were there. I think that they marked to a large degree, the entities that we're talking about today, Western civilization and culture, as well as Islam and the Muslim world, at varying degrees, in varying locations, probably in different moments of time. But in essence, it was those values that created the kind of strength within the Muslim world, as well as within the West, generally speaking. And it was very much the going against those very values that marked the downturn and the spiraling out of control of at least the Muslim civilization. But now we're witnessing the beginning of that downturn here in the West. And for reasons that have been already mentioned by Dr. 𝗔𝗹𝘁 𝗔𝗹𝘁, as well as Professor John Esposito, and I'm pretty sure we'll hear from Professor Yasin Aqtai, as well as Dr. Ibrahim Rasool. It's, of course, I mean, we talk about the elements of conflict today, and most notably the recent conflict between, the attacks of the Israelis on the Palestinian people, and the failure of the world to keep Israel at check. But in my view, this, as momentous as it is, and as expansive and important as it is merely a symptom of a greater illness. And that illness is our failure as human beings, whether we be in the West or whether we be Muslims or whoever we be, to actually abide by the very values that our civilizations perpetuate and propagated. And I think that hence lies many of the problems that we face today, whether they be political, whether they be economic, whether they be security, on industrial, on every single level. The problem that we face today, and I'll talk from my perspective here in the West, we are facing a crisis, and that crisis is existential. And I'm talking about a crisis from within, as well as that crisis in dealing with the other, or actually designating who the other is and how we should deal with that other. Within the West, or the Western civilization, if you wish, the past year has been telling. The past year has been extremely telling. The impact of COVID-19 on every single aspect of life, which put to the test the very extremities of the brilliance and technological and medical and laboratory advancements that we have achieved, and which, you know, we hold proud over all of humanity, was tested to the degree that I think that we would merely pass, or probably even be deemed to have failed. The fact that we were clueless as societies, with all the advancements and all the brilliance that we held and all the sources that we had, actually we failed, to the extent that it was only for what we would term, you know, very probably passingly and very passively as authoritarian, draconian measures to be implemented, that we kept control. You know, this was only controlled by extreme measures of control of the public, and rightly so, of course. But what I mean is that when the most advanced amongst us, those who hold the bastion of this civilization, when they fail to the degree that they did, that brings into question the whole premise upon which this civilization sits. The fact that there were, in many sessions that I attended, amongst which were some very high placed think tanks and study and research centers, including Chatham House, for instance, when people, you know, throw about the question, you know, is democracy and the kind of model that we build our civilization upon, is it more apt to dealing with crises such as this, or probably a little bit more authoritarianism would do us good? The fact that all you know, China had to do was that the premier say something and everyone just stood in line, whilst here, because of democracy, because of freedom, there were so many layers to go through in order to bring to an end, for instance, school days. You know, questions like this that bring us to question the very basis of our being and who we are and our identities is extremely telling. The fact that so many people died under our watch, in our watch, brings into question the fact that how safe can one be as we perform these days? Once again, I go back to the main issue, the issue of the value system that we uphold, the value system that we promote, the value system which we defend to the death, that we fight for, that it becomes worth waging wars in order to defend. That value system is crumbling. We talk about freedoms, and there can be no question that when, you know, where I sit, the space of freedoms and the expanse of freedoms that I enjoy are incomparable when looking upon places like Syria or Egypt or Iraq or Libya or the such. That goes beyond question. But that's not how the degree of my freedom is measured. I was told, my civilization told me, that freedom was an essential element within its being. And that goes from the private to the public. As we stand today, freedoms are being curtailed on a systematic, regular, consistent basis, and there is absolutely no space to fight them back. The spaces of expression are being contested. My dear brother mentions about marching up and down the streets of London and bringing cities to a halt on issues which we regard as being righteous. And by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we managed to bring out, 150 and then 200,000 people to London in order to protest against the Israeli crimes. But that took a lot of effort, because now our parliament, London, the bastion of democracy, passed a law which actually restricts public protests to the level whereby you have to jump through hoops in order to hold a protest. And that happened under our watch. The economic disparity that is going to be the mark of the next decade at least, because of the impact of the year and a half that we've all been through. This economic disparity is so vast and so obscene that it's difficult to quantify. We share on WhatsApp groups or on emails, we share the image that 1% own as much as 75% of the human population own. And we say it flippantly, but if we give it some thought, it's absolutely obscene. And it's a mark of how the civilization that we're holding on to is definitely on the downturn, unless there is an emergency recovery to allow some sort of equilibrium in our existence as human beings. John mentioned the issue of democracy, of freedoms. Our strongest friends and allies around the world are some of the most dictatorial, authoritarian regimes there are. And that's a mark of who we are. It's good. It's not good enough saying that I'm a democratic country and all my systems are run democratically, when I could so passively and so quite credulously actually stand by and watch as other fledgling democracies are crushed, as we did here in Europe, throughout the world, in the case of Egypt and in the case of so many places where democracy was about to be built once again after a century of deprivation from all freedoms and liberties. The issue of equality, of equity, the issue of there are so many issues that I believe are merely symptoms, as big as they are, as critical as they are, but they are merely symptoms of the essential issue upon which we can avoid a civilizational clash, or we can actually perpetuate one. And that is the issue of our values. What are our values? What are our values? Are those values aspects for which we are willing to live and die, to fight and to create peace, and also to ensure that others live by, develop, and enhance? This is no zero-sum game. Some imagine that the rise of a particular civilization must be upon the ruins of another that has just crumbled. It's not like that anymore. We don't live in the same times as the Roman Empire or the Chinese civilization of old. These are different times. And we need to make absolutely sure and certain that the values that we live by, and by the way, these are values that aren't restricted to a geographical place nor a historical time frame. These are values which most sane and rational human beings, regardless of their faith, regardless of their creed, of their ethnicity, of the tongue that they speak, agree upon. And therefore, we already have shared values which various people around the world agree upon. And therefore, we have the basis to create a truly great and tremendous civilization. However, if those values are used as commercial issues that are to be monetized, to gain greater authority and control, to restrict and to probably even enslave others, and to create gaps of conflict and disparity, then our civilization, our own house, becomes under great threat. I look forward to hearing from everyone and then to taking part in the discussion. I would urge that this first session is built upon by follow-up sessions, because the details of this and the issues of, whether they be political or economic or cultural, are so vast that they need a new set of ideas and a new way of thinking in order to address and to hopefully then resolve. Thank you so much to everyone.